Good afternoon. This is the June 14, 2024 meeting of the Legislative Study Commission for the Environmental and Health Effects of Poly and Perfluorinated Alkylated Substances. The commission does not have a quorum at this time, but we will proceed with our usual agenda with the exception of the minutes, which we will address at our next meeting in July. First, I'm very pleased to have Catherine Taylor with us today to speak to the impacts on housing values, which has been a subject of her master's research. And, you know, for those of us in Bedford, back in 2016, when the news broke, EPA hadn't established a standard and did over the course of the year, and testing was done. Bringing us to the point where a neighborhood was identified and having high PFAS levels. Assessed values have to be reported to the DRA by April 1st of each year. So obviously there weren't comparables done, but our assessor felt it would be fair to discount those homes by 20%. And so that impacts everybody else in town, both residents and businesses, as well as the statewide property tax. And then as soon as there was a solution proposed for extending the water lines, those values went back up. And so, you know, anecdotally, it's been a concern, and that's how we handled it historically. But I'm very pleased to have Catherine here to speak to the subject for us. Can't hear you. No.
What about now?
Yes. Great.
Okay. Okay, try to use headphones to make sure we cut out on any surrounding noise, but hopefully my computer does a good job of muting any odd things you may hear, so I apologize for that. So thank you so much for having me here. So I just graduated with my master's from UNH, and today I'd like to talk about what I did for my master's thesis, because it's always great to be able to connect with the community. I really strive to do impactful research, and I think that there will be some interesting things you'll hear about here. So can everyone see my screen? Okay, so I'll get started.
We see your presenter mode, so if you want to switch your display to
Great. How about now?
perfect.
Okay, great. So now I'm just trying to get my computer to show me something. Sorry about the technical issues. I haven't used this go-to before. Okay, so I studied PFAS contamination in private wells in New Hampshire and its role on housing market response. So I found a couple interesting things, and then I also did a follow-up survey afterwards to try and get more information about why we observed the market behavior that we did. Great. So my study area was 3 counties in southern New Hampshire. So this is because they're the most populous, although my follow-up survey did apply to further counties, Hillsborough, Rockingham, and Stratford counties. So I think because of the urban versus rural and suburban makeup, we kind of got a good variety of people that we sampled. And And this is a big issue because 46% of New Hampshire residents get their drinking water from private wells, as I'm sure a lot of you are on private wells. It's a different story across the country. So it's important to monitor PFAS at the private well level as well as the municipal level. So in terms of our study area, we were looking at wells that were sampled between 2015 and 2021 where PFAS exceeded 70 nanograms per liter. You can interpret nanograms per liter the same as parts per trillion, so sometimes I go back and forth between those two measurements, but that was just determined in 2016 to be an unsafe level of PFAS. So we now know that these limits have gotten a lot more stringent, so that parts per trillion has lowered. But for now, for our study, since we're starting in 2015, we're looking conservatively as PFAS over 70 parts per trillion in a private well is being unsafe for human consumption. So this graph shows all of the wells in our sample. So you can see that there's a clustering around the town of Merrimack, which, as you all know, I sat in a couple of these PFAS commissions just lurking. This is because of point source links from Saint-Gobain Plastics, which is a plastic manufacturer. PFAS were a byproduct of their manufacturing processes. So why are PFAS in New Hampshire? You guys already know this, but I gave this presentation to people who were not aware. So some point sources were Saint-Gobain Plastics, Pease Air Force Base. And the issue I'm studying here is that the groundwater was contaminated, so that's compromising people's private wells. Some other sources that are being found in the news almost every day are pesticides, sewage sludge for agricultural purposes, and consumer products. So in terms of the timeline for New Hampshire, in 2016, PFOA was detected at Saint-Gobain, and that was around the time of that 70 parts per trillion advisory that I discussed before. In 2018, PFAS were found in private wells, and the Saint-Gobain consent decree, which this commission deals with, was around this time. And then in 2019, New Hampshire was very progressive, one of the first states in the country to set a parts per trillion maximum allowable limit below the EPA's federal limit. And in 2024, this was just a couple days before I defended my thesis, the EPA lowered the PFAS limit to 4 parts per trillion. So it's kind of crazy to look at people who have never heard of PFAS before, how we're going from 70 to 4 in not that long of a time. But these are things that you all know. Again, I'll go through this very quickly, but we all know what PFAS are. We're in this commission, and some of the health impacts that can be associated with exposure. So my research questions. First, we were looking at how does PFAS contamination in private wells in New Hampshire affect housing sale prices? This is because I am trained as an environmental economist, and one of the easiest ways to try and look at the cost of a contaminant is to look at housing values. So we would assume that maybe a home that had PFAS in their private well above safe drinking levels would have a depreciation in its sold price than those with safe water or completely safe water. But as I did this research, I found some interesting results. So then I added some research questions. So does fragmented information about PFAS explain the market response that I observed, which I'll get to in just a moment? And what role does information play in environmental justice concerns? So who is notified versus who is not notified? Who is able to go find this information and do their own research, and who doesn't really have the time for that? So first, this is just kind of a graphical display of what I did. So we know that there was a point source contamination and that got into groundwater. Very kindly, I had data from NHDES on well samples with PFAS. And then I also had housing sales data that has like characteristics of the home, when it was sold, the price it was sold at, et cetera, from 2015 to 2021. So I did some spatial association. So I assumed that a well closest to a home, I would associate it with that and say, okay, so the closest well we're going to be looking at as the PFAS concentration characteristic of this home. So hopefully I'll be measuring the cost of PFAS to households. So doing that in 2 ways. So stated preference, which just means we ask people how they value PFAS and how they value PFAS in their well. That is from the survey. And then revealed preference is we're observing market behavior. So how much did people actually pay for these homes? This I'll skip through very close. I have to put it in my presentations for academia. But just for you guys to know that other people who have done similar studies with different groundwater contaminants, such as arsenic, overall findings are mixed, but usually a 0.5 to 6% reduction in home prices. And this is lower than using this property value method with other types of contaminants that are more visible, like things that are like in surface water or having a landfill nearby. They found a lot higher percentage reductions than something that's kind of invisible, underground, that people don't always know about. So what did I find? This is just specifying where I got my data, and that it was a pretty high, rich data set, so that gave me pretty accurate information. Again, this is for the academia folks, but all this is I'm making an equation where I'm trying to say the price of a home, how does that relate to the structural characteristics, like how many bedrooms, how big it is, the locational characteristics, like what county it's located in, and then some PFAS characteristics. So my results, the structural and locational coefficients are as expected. Simply, that just means that my model looks good. It seems like everything is accurate. However, I did not find any significant effect of my PFAS variables on home price. So just looking at the property value analysis alone, it would seem that if a home has PFAS over 70 parts per trillion in their private well, it does not have any impact on the home's price. And other researchers, I just went to a conference of other agricultural and resource economists. They are finding similar things, and that just using these property values alone, we're not seeing much of an impact. So earlier, as you were saying, they were depreciating your home's value by 20%. Not really what we were finding. So I was really curious about why this is. You would assume that people would be a little bit wary to purchase a home that had PFAS in its well. So I had to test a couple hypotheses. So that's why I sent out my survey. So some hypotheses: home buyers are not informed about PFAS in their wells. So this is the most obvious one. If you're purchasing a home and you're not told that there's PFAS in the well, then why would you depreciate the value you're willing to pay for it? Also, home buyers may be unsure of the health risks of PFAS exposure, so they might not know exactly what to think, or if they should depreciate the price, if they should try and decide to live somewhere else, because health guidance has been changing at the federal level even. There's a lack of disclosure requirements. I have been keeping an eye on this House bill. Some other states like New Jersey are considering things like this, where a home seller would have to disclose if there are PFAS in exceedance of these limits. Especially with private wells, there's a lack of standard testing, even for things we know are a problem like arsenic and lead. Especially in this region, people have a perception, or at least I hypothesize, people have a perception that well water is cleaner than municipally supplied water. So that is something I asked about, and I found an interesting result, as you'll see. So because it's not required, a lot of private, and it might be even on the tab of private homeowners, they're not testing their wells as frequently for contaminants like this. So I explored whether or not these hypotheses made sense with my survey. Some additional things, mitigation actions. So we know that in this state, I know that there's a large rebate program for those installing filters. If you were to purchase a home that has PFAS in its well, but it already is installed with a filter, maybe you would consider that even a bonus or an increase in the home's value to you. Also, as we all know here, the tight market conditions, especially after COVID, led to a lot of very quick purchases, maybe without the due diligence of the buyers. A lot of cash purchases, sight unseen. So that obviously would have a huge impact. And then the marginal effect. So especially because the effects of PFAS are seen over usually someone's lifetime, over many years, how does that correspond to how much people are willing to pay for a home? So on average, homes are valued at $440,000 in my sample. So I decided to send out a survey. What was really unique about this, I normally don't get the opportunity to do this, is I had, from my property value analysis, I had those addresses. So I was able to directly send this survey to ask people, okay, so it seems like you didn't depreciate the value you were willing to pay with a home with PFAS. Why was that? So I sent out this postcard, and this is very common nowadays with mail-in surveys, that we didn't get a super high response rate. So some of my information you have to keep in mind. I have kind of a low sample size, but I still think it's really interesting because we still got, about 200 people, homeowners in New Hampshire with PFAS in their well. telling us how they perceive these issues, which I think will be most interesting to you. So first, I had a couple themes. So one was that imperfect information piece, so whether or not people knew about PFAS in their well when they purchased. So I asked, prior to purchasing your home, were you aware of the potential for PFAS to contaminate a household's drinking water? So of course, I can't tell people that they have PFAS in their well, just in case. My survey was, maybe they don't have PFAS in their well anymore. I had to be a little bit careful on the wording of that. But a really big result was 62.9% of respondents were not aware that PFAS could even contaminate a home's drinking water, even though I know that I sent this to people who generally had an issue with PFAS above safe limits in their well. There we go. And then prior to taking the survey, were you aware of this potential? So maybe when they purchased their home, they weren't aware, but they learned later. So 71.2% were made aware after they purchased their home. So that explains why we didn't see any depreciation in price. And I asked, did you research or ask about the quality of your drinking water before you purchased your home? So 74.7% said they did. So that's pretty high percentage. So obviously these people were trying to do their due diligence and they do care about the quality of their drinking water when making their home buying decision. Yet 65.2% never or did not often seek out any information about PFAS. So what I'm seeing, or what I'm interpreting here, is a massive disconnect between even those that are really concerned about water quality issues. They don't know to research about PFAS. They don't know that they need this information or where to get this information. So then I asked some questions about how they perceived their water and how their level of concern was about this issue. So how would you rate the overall safety of water coming from your faucet or tap? Most respondents considered their water to be safe, even though most of the people I sent the survey to did have an issue with PFAS contamination in their wells. And 71.6% of respondents had some to high concern about PFAS in drinking water. So my research isn't showing that people weren't appreciating the price of their home because they don't care about PFAS. They are concerned about PFAS, but because they don't know it's in their water, they consider their water to be safe, right? And then a question I asked, do you believe that well water is of a higher quality than municipally supplied water? Those who were decided on this issue, 64.5%, did believe that well water was a higher quality, which could be leading to people not doing this due diligence and not testing their wells as often. And there was some uncertainty, so 50% neither agreed nor disagreed with their statement on well quality, and 37% chose a concern level of 3, which is kind of in the middle. So I think that there's some uncertainty. People don't really know what to think about PFAS in their water. They're not able to fully, at least within themselves, think about the risks that are associated with that exposure. I also asked about mitigation actions, so I think this will also be interesting. So I asked what mitigation actions, if any, have you taken to remediate this problem? So the most common was to request a well test. So 76.9% of those did that. So that's a mitigating action they're taking to gain more information about PFAS in their home. The second was to use a whole house filter, which was more popular than using a faucet filter. Right now, guidance is looking that you don't necessarily need a whole house filter unless you have small children or you have elderly or you're planning to consume water from different faucets in the home. But I think it was interesting that people are choosing this more conservative option anyway, that even though it might be more costly to choose a whole house filter over a faucet filter or pitcher. So this willingness to pay is another economic technique that we use. We say, so we asked if there was a monthly subscription service that would be added to your water bill that would make sure that you do not have enough PFAS in your water to cause any negative health impacts, would you be willing to pay for this service? So most people were willing to pay, so 58.3% in these willingness to pay studies. That's usually what we expect. 58 is a little bit higher than the 50%. That's normal. So it seems like New Hampshire residents are a little bit more willing to pay to remove PFAS from their water. And then the range of that was between $11 and $15, which is similar to what my predecessor, who was a master's student, and my advisor found that people were willing to pay $13 a month. I found they were willing to pay between $11 and $15 a month mostly. So if you think about that yearly, that's $132 conservatively. Whereas a filtration system, this is looking at like a whole house filter, is $1,000 plus maybe $50 or more in maintenance every year. So if people were really thinking about these costs or had enough information to think about these costs, it seems like if they were planning to live in their home for more than 10 years, they might choose to get this larger filter. Again, this is more math things, but really all this is saying is I tried to put this information back into my hedonic model, and I still didn't find that PFAS had a significant impact on home price. So this may be consistent with my hypothesis that this imperfect information is why we're not seeing people diminish the price they're willing to pay for homes, even if they have PFAS contamination. So discussion, and I'd love to have, any questions. Like I said, I just graduated, but I have been in this space for a really long time. And I have talked to a lot of other researchers doing similar research across the country. They're finding similar things. So generally, we did not find evidence that PFAS had an impact on home price. And this is potentially due to imperfect information. But survey results suggest people are concerned about PFAS. However, they're unaware of the potential for PFAS to be contaminating a home's drinking water. And respondents perceive their drinking water to be safe, but are concerned about PFAS. So generally, my conclusion is that, lack of timely and consistent information, because as the science is coming out, people are seeing really different things, and it's probably being communicated different in the news versus the federal level versus the state level. So home buyers are not really considering PFAS, or they don't exactly know how to assess these risks. So they don't exactly know, okay, so the health risk, what is exactly going to happen to me, and how should I consider that when considering buying a whole house filter, a pitcher filter, etc., or even just doing a test. So then hopefully, this is for the academic people, but hopefully that this is a methodology for future work. So I think that if we were to do this study again in maybe 5 or 10 years, we might have a significant impact because information about PFAS is being so much more widely distributed across the entire country, and especially in states where there's been an issue. And something for future research is that this information asymmetry, so some people are informed about PFAS in their wells more than others, could lead to environmental justice concerns. So, in this space, we know that there are communities that are much harder to reach. Maybe they have some mistrust of local government, or maybe they're just not in the local news. It can actually be very difficult to get people to adopt these type of filters. So I think with this research, it's shown that New Hampshire residents are more willing to adopt filters than I've seen in other studies from my peers. However, the information disconnect is still a big thing, and something that I think needs to be addressed. So thank you for listening. So these are all the people I worked with. And of course, emails, you can email me. And then if I don't know, then I can obviously email people who know more than me. So it was really great to be able to do this research, because most times after I've presented to the general public, I've had people saying, oh, I live in that area, or oh, I have an issue with this. And I was able to grant them a little bit of clarity about the situation. So yes, so thank you for listening. It's really valuable to me to be able to present this to people that might be able to make an impact at the regulatory, on the regulatory front. So I guess I will try to answer any questions that people may have.
Okay, I am in a view where I can't see everybody. I'm not sure how to get out of it. And
I
so,
Chris, Lorene.
okay, go ahead and ask questions. Thank you.
Yeah, I can't see anyone either.
Yeah.
It's just my presentation.
Hi, I'm Lorene Allen, citizen representative for Merrimack. A couple of comments here that I jotted down. One, fortunately, we are in an area where there's been incredible attention to making sure people have safe water through the rebate program and what we've done here for Merrimack District Water, which is well water, groundwater is for drinking water in this area. So I'm very thankful for that, because your work is on environmental economics, which is a fascinating field. I've had some interface with that, but ultimately this is an educational issue and it is a public health issue. So there's a couple things that I just wanted you to know moving forward. One is, well, I kind of smiled to myself when you said it isn't such a long period of time. To me, over 8 years working on making sure we're safe, in this area has been an incredibly long time. So that was interesting. Mike is smiling. I mean, everybody's done a lot of work here, but my gosh. So one of the things you had said is guidance is stating that whole house filters may not be needed, point of use could be effective. I'm not sure where you get that information, but it kind of gave me pause because you're looking at homes that are over 70 parts in your data set. That is an appallingly high number. I'm not sure if you know that. You had also said that federal guidance is not there. Federal guidance is there. Federal guidance is looking at 6 PFAS to be regulated. Those are the ones that they can legally defend because, of course, they've been sued, and I'm sure they will prevail. But, they said 0.003 parts per quadrillion was the level of impacts to health for PFAS, 2 of the PFAS, 2 of the legacy. And the other ones are part of the mixture, we're exposed as a class. Your water filtration system is of the utmost importance. Many of the cancers we see and disruptions to health are in organs of elimination, be it breasts, be it kidneys, be it various other body parts. So this is a very sneaky chemical class. So that being said, I want you to know that the federal guidance is there. The health guidance has changed in the official ATSDR CDC guidance as of this spring. I think it's on the DHHS website and Dartmouth website if you want to incorporate that perhaps into your work. Because I know when you're looking at data sets, you're looking at the time that you're doing your work in your own timeline. But I think if you're going to present this to, I don't know where, it would be real important that the public health part be updated. And if you want to ever reach out to me, I'll give you those links. But the ATSDR has incorporated the sum total of 20 parts for 7 PFAS is a level where we don't ignore it between 2 and 20 parts. And that's not, or exposure is cumulative, it's bioaccumulative. So at those levels, we are going to monitor health. Unfortunately, we don't have any guidance on that official, work that has been tried to get done by the legislative body in a class action suit has pushed that aside. There's a real reluctance to connect exposure and outcome in areas where money is involved and liability is involved, which personally appalls me because if we don't have our health, what else do we have? So the guidance is there. And whole house is important in the areas that you're studying, the 6,000 plus data points definitively, because what we do know definitively is PFAS exposure comes from ingestion, inhalation, and dermal absorption. This is why consumer products, this is why firefighters have from their gear into their pores. We know in our area that drinking water is probably the largest source of our own personal contamination in these impacted communities, but all sources are valid sources when you need to decrease your body burden. And it is, your findings aren't surprising to me because we've tried to put bills through for a number of years now that just say that add PFAS to the test panel when you buy property. So when you check into your water and you buy a private well, like if you come from Massachusetts or somewhere where you just assume your water from your tap magically appears and you get a water bill, you're not familiar with private wells. And, you'll test it for, metals, bacteria, arsenic, whatever's in that panel. You'll do radon tests in your home and various things, but PFAS is not included. So this is a highly toxic hazardous substance that has evaded hazardous substance designation for 40 plus years. It's astonishing, right? Because we know these things are all true, and how do they fit together? They impact health, they alter health. They're the most persistent endocrine disruptor on the planet, which is, that's what it's all about for humans. And we have a long way to go. And I think in Southern New Hampshire, a lot of people here and many people in our communities have done a tremendous job. And the state has worked with us to make sure that people have the right information. Of course, we know we have further to go on that. So those are my comments, and I hope you can keep those in mind. Thank you for your work.
Thank you so much.
Other question? Of course. Is that you, Don? Yes, go ahead.
Thanks, Catherine. That was very intriguing presentation. I think you said the data that you looked at was through 2021, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
I was surprised to see, was it like 63% were not aware that PFAS was a concern. It'd be interesting to know what that is today, because I think there's been a lot more information presented, especially in the Bedford area, with the sampling that was covered outside of the consent decree boundary that was established. So hopefully that number, that awareness would go up more than it was before. And one comparison I'd like to make you aware of is I'm the chair of the Board of Commissioners of Merrimack Village District. We're a nonprofit water company that provides water to most of Merrimack. It's a public drinking water system. Back in 2019, the customers became aware through a lot of kind of grassroots information that was presented to them. And one of the numbers that really sticks out is at that time, when the limits were at 70 for PFOA and PFOS, the petitioners, the customers, presented their own warrant articles for treatment, and that was going to be at their own cost by raising rates. And those warrant articles were approved by a 93% favorability vote. So that tells me that public education and awareness is the major critical thing to, once people are aware that there's an issue there and it could affect their home prices, even though it apparently didn't. I think it didn't because people just aren't aware of it, right? So I think once people are aware, I think the numbers are going to go a lot higher as far as being concerned and wanting to do something about it. But so that was an alarming number back in 2019 with that much favorability, and the warrant articles were presented so that the estimated cost of treatment raised the rates from what was in place back then 70%, and all those treatment plants are finished now, and that's basically where we ended up with the customers' increase in rates. And even with that increase in rates, you know, in today's environment, it's people are still, we're in favor of it. And you know, I haven't had anybody come back to me and say, I wish we would have never spent that money. I wish the customers' bills wouldn't have increased by that much. I haven't heard any negative feedback on that. So hopefully the public education has a different outcome more recently with Bedford being more aware of more wells being impacted than what originally was thought, even back in 2021. Because I think this latest push on getting those extraneous wells beyond the boundary of the consent decree really came to full fruition just in the last 2 or 3 years. So hopefully the awareness is much greater out there now. But that presentation was good. Nobody ever really quantified the impact on a residential market like that. So it was good to see. Thanks.
Thank you.
Great. Anyone else? All right. Thank you, Catherine. It was very enlightening and thought-provoking. So, definitely awareness of the issue to begin with, and awareness of health consequences played a big role historically in your data. And thought-provoking is how to address it in the future. So thank you.
Yeah, I think that especially with you folks, as Lorraine said, it's not surprising necessarily, but it's always you trying to use your anecdotal experience. And now at least there's something saying, okay, so I did everything, correctly. And I did, this formal random study, and it's showing what anecdotally a lot of us knew. But sometimes you just need that evidence to be able to push it a little bit further. So again, thank you so much for the opportunity to present this.
Thank you. Okay. Mike, do you want to give us your DES update?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Good afternoon. And Catherine, thank you very much. That was very interesting. So the update for DES, we'll start as we always do with the Air Division. On May 6th of this year, the division staff spoke with the Saint-Gobain representative about the plans for the facility and specifically termination of the state permit to operate and submittal of final reports and such. Saint-Gobain informed the division that there was still some work taking place in the fabrication area, but that should be done by the end of May. And what we've heard is that indeed their manufacturing and fabrication operations have been terminated. They're no longer doing any of that there since the end of the month. Saint-Gobain anticipates submitting a request to terminate the state permit to operate and submit their final reports and fees by late June. They are in discussions with the town of Merrimack regarding the emergency generator that's on the property that is used for the sprinkler system, which will remain. We believe that they used to have two emergency generators or two generators. Combined, they represented a potential for emissions that were subject to an air permit, but we believe that it's unlikely that this individual generator that will remain solely for the sprinkler system will require an air permit. So, but that is still being determined. And then with regard to stack testing activities, as you all know, we've talked about it for months now. The annual stack test took place back in September, and there were DES staff members present to observe that. All indications were that the equipment and the testing went as planned. And a final report was submitted to DES in November, and I understand now that that was approved by DES in February. So that's been closed out. And then moving on to the facility closure issues more broadly. As you all know, back in August, DES was notified that Saint-Gobain would be closing the Merrimack facility as part of an effort to restructure their business in the United States. Saint-Gobain has now completed manufacturing operations, as I indicated a moment ago. They've indicated they'll continue to work with DES on the ongoing environmental investigation and remediation effort, including providing bottled water and permanent alternate water solutions as appropriate within the consent decree area. They have indicated during the November site visit that we made that their plans are to remove all materials, waste, and processing equipment from the facility. They hired Ramball, which is a global architecture and engineering firm, to assist them with those activities. We received a letter report documenting the status of their planned closure activities and an associated schedule back on April 15th. And in previous meetings, I've summarized what that report indicated, and that I'll for continuity, just to keep people apprised, I'll keep those notes in the notes that I provide for the meeting minutes, but I'm not going to go through those now. As I said, it's our current understanding that manufacturing and fabrication activities have been completed and that their current work is focusing on disassembly of the regenerative thermal oxidizer, or RTO. We're going to request another update letter to get a current status report. And we also plan to conduct a follow-up site visit sometime this summer to ensure that the property doesn't pose any additional risk to human health and the environment following its closure. And it's our understanding that their closure schedule for completing their decommissioning activities is still focused on the end of the calendar year. So if we go to the waste division update, first we talk about point of entry treatment systems. As you all know, the first POET system was installed back in December of 22. And as of May 1st of this year, there have been 636 POET systems that have been installed. Their contractor provided second notices to folks who hadn't responded on April 2nd. And we've received several calls over time from residents following that second notice. On July 1 of last year, Saint-Gobain started their POET system rebate program, which we've talked about in previous meetings. They indicated that they received approximately 35 reimbursement requests, which were reviewed for eligibility and reimbursement back in September. They notified residents of their eligibility status in February, and the letters provided directions on how to set up the process to be issued payments. To date, we believe that they've started that process, and I think somewhere on the order of 35 reimbursement requests have been received and have been processed. We do receive inquiries for the rebate program on occasion, and we forward those along to Saint-Gobain and their consultant for consideration. With regard to water line installations, Saint-Gobain's proceeding with design and construction work for water line installation for the towns of Litchfield, Bedford, and Merrimack. Construction associated with the Hillcrest Road water main extension area of Litchfield has been underway since October of last year. At this point, all the water mains for this project have been installed and tested. The water meter installations began in April, and 15 residences have been disconnected from their water supply well and are now receiving water provided by the water utility. Connection of water services are expected to continue through July, and the water utility has indicated that 34 properties have declined connection to the water line, with 14 of those properties opting to have a line extended from the curb stop area into the home, but not to connect to the water supply system. DES sent a letter to 33 non-responsive residents back in March, and the water utility received responses from 11 properties that had previously identified as non-responsive. At this time, 12 residents provided a written response declining a service connection, and 8 residents didn't respond to the DES and Saint-Gobain notices. Saint-Gobain's been working with the utility company to complete the design for service connections to existing water mains in the towns of Bedford and Londonderry. Bids have been received for this work, and the water utility has awarded the work to a contractor. Service application requests have been sent to 31 eligible properties, and completed applications have been received for 7 locations. The water utility anticipates the contractor will start these service connections later this month. Their consultants finalized design packages for extensions and connections to existing water mains for the Merrimack, Wildcat, Brenda Lane service connections, and reviewed bids for the project and issued a notice of award to the selected contractor. The service application requests have been provided to all eligible properties. The company anticipates finalizing contracts in June of this month. These projects are estimated to take approximately 3 to 4 months to be completed, and we expect that they'll be completed this calendar year. The company is working with a water utility in the town of Londonderry to evaluate the feasibility of water line extensions in the town. The conceptual design was completed on behalf of Saint-Gobain by the utility back in April of 23. DES has met with Saint-Gobain, the town of Londonderry, and the water utility multiple times, including recently, to discuss expanded water service in this area. And companion to that, Londonderry has applied for supplemental funding to assist in the long-term expansion of municipal water in the town. So those discussions are ongoing, and certainly as soon as some development comes, we'll be happy to share that information with you. So with regard to the groundwater management permit, we've discussed that at some length here in previous meetings. We issued an approval letter on May 3rd of last year requesting that an application for groundwater management permit be submitted to DES by May 3rd of this year. And DES met to discuss with Saint-Gobain, met to discuss the application on May 7th of this year. Based on the outcome of that meeting, it was determined that Saint-Gobain was electing not to submit a groundwater application in June as had been anticipated, but rather they proposed to conduct some more long-term monitoring of drinking water wells under a work plan. And that's something that we're willing to look at what they're proposing. We've not made any decision on that. So we requested that work plan be submitted no later than June 22nd, so in about a week or two. DES has been periodically receiving updated proposals from the company to remedy additional water supply wells within the consent decree area. And that follows the agreements that have been made over the last couple of years since April and June of 22. That includes a term sheet attachment number 19, and a link to that will be included in the notes. And that was received and reviewed by DES back in March. And that attachment includes an updated list of remedies for all the properties since the April of 2022 proposal. And we anticipate that a new proposal with updated additional properties will be submitted in July of this year. So with regard to water supply sampling, I do try, if you review the notes, I often leave, just for context and as a reminder, information about past work that's been done, some of the statistics associated with that. I'm not necessarily going to read them here, but they'll be in the notes. But to update you, we've talked before about properties within the consent decree boundary where Saint-Gobain has been unwilling to perform sampling. We proceeded to complete sampling at those remaining homes that are within the outer boundary. And the sampling effort was initiated in March, and a mailing of sample invitation letters and water supply started on April 17th. And the invitation letters were mailed to approximately 146 property owners. As of June 7th, approximately 63 residences have been sampled, either sampled or scheduled to be sampled. Results have been received and collected from 28 properties, and approximately 82 property owners have not responded to the sample invitation, and 2 have declined sampling. We anticipate that it will take approximately 2 months to complete this effort, and we plan to cost recover from Saint-Gobain for the allocation of resources that was necessary to do this sampling work. With regard to folks who previously have been unresponsive to requests or offers of sampling, we provided a notification via letter back in April, on April 2nd, to approximately 900 property owners that had previously not been responsive to the company's request to conduct sampling of their water supply wells. These were properties that were previously identified for sampling but had not responded to the initial letters and had not returned access agreement or had not returned access agreements. DES letters notified property owners of their eligibility to be sampled and requested that they contact the company's consultant to have the sampling completed. Their consultant indicated that they have received significant response, about 100 calls from property owners based on that mailing. So that's encouraging that it had a meaningful impact to get those new notices out. And then as of, to give you some statistics on sampling, as of May 28th of this year, which is updated based to reflect up through Addendum 18, the proposed sampling plan, 3,867 properties were identified for sampling. That's not a change. 3,855 access agreements were sent. That's also not a change. 2,533 samples were collected from water supply wells, and that's 45 more than the April report. And 1,143 second samples were collected from water supply wells, and that includes 971 samples that were collected since June of 2023. Which was an initiative that the company undertook at our request. And then 1,134 properties have been offered bottled water, and that's 10 more than the April report. And then moving on to site investigation, we've talked before about the status of the remedial action plan. We still have a revised remedial action plan in for review. We will be commenting on that. We've not done so yet, but that is still pending. And then attached to the report, there will be the usual graphics that indicate the progress in the remedy implementation, both for POET systems and for waterline connections. And those numbers are more encouraging than they were in the very beginning when we first started putting out those graphics. There was a lot of zeros, but just to summarize it, I won't go through all of it, but in very round numbers. So if you look at POETs, in aggregate of all the POETs that have been proposed for installation and need to be installed, just under 84% of those have been completed. And again, when those are complete and implemented, that means that they've not only been installed, but they've gone through the verification and sampling process to ensure that the treatment system is working effectively. And as it breaks down in the towns, about 56% of those slated for Merrimack have been completed, 94% in Londonderry, 97% in Litchfield, 75% in Hudson, and 80% in Bedford. So that's encouraging. And you'll see, and when you look at that, keep in mind that there's two pieces of information in those bar charts. One is the percentage that's completed, but also the size of the bar there reflects how many how many of those actual installations are happening in each town. So for example, you know, it says 75% for Hudson, but there's only, I think, 4 identified for Hudson, and 3 of them are done. So whereas in some other places it's much larger, like in Bedford, there are over 400 POET systems slated, and about 380 of them are complete. So it's important to kind of look at those with a careful eye to understand what the magnitude of those statistics mean. And then on the water line connections, it's, you know, again, Londonderry is a big 0 at this point because that plan hasn't been reconciled and finalized yet. Merrimack is also a 0, but that again is that's not for all time. That's for the ones that are slated now that aren't done yet. And that, you know, none of those are happening, but as you heard earlier in my review, those are slated to happen this year. So certainly take a look at those, and if you have any questions about them, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. And with that, that concludes it. I'm happy to field any questions. I know Christy and Sue, but Lorraine, if you want.
Okay. I have 3. One is an aside. Do you know the timeline for the soil standards process? That's just a quick little FYI.
Well, those, yeah, the ENV OR 600 rules, which include establishing soil remediation standards, went to public comment, and I believe the public comment period probably is just finishing this week, if I remember correctly. And then we'll be reviewing those comments, and then you know, making any changes that we think are appropriate as a result of the public comment that's received, and then proceeding to file those rules with the Joint Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules. I think that likely is something that I don't know for sure, but I'd say probably we're not likely to get to the Joint Legislative Committee until at least August, because we're going to need to give some time to review give a careful review to the public comment that we've received.
I know we were talking about May-ish for it to open, but a couple months ago I asked about this, and I noted that before the website was done over, there was emails somehow magically linked to that, or you had this email list, and people would get these emails and notifications, you know, when they were new. The old website had those blog updates, right? And people would get emails, and it would say, this is going on, this is going on. So I didn't see any notification of the public comment, and I would expect that, you know, it's the old New Hampshire way to post it somewhere or put it in a paper and nobody sees it and everybody did their job. But I don't know, was the Health Commission notified that the public comment period opened, or we just continue to have these little communication glitches, you know, that is typical.
I am confident that we made notice where required with regard to the rules and the comment period, and it would have been on our website. I don't know whether it went to the PFAS blog or not, but that's a fair question. I can check.
You know, this is an issue that's always been there, and just I don't know what we can do about it. I mean, it was, I have to say, the first maybe 6 years, 5 years at least of this investigation. It wasn't fun, but a good part for those at least the first 4 or 5 years was we were getting regular emails as long as you were on that list, of however you got on that list. Lots of people were, I knew lots of people were. So the issue is, you know, how does, you know, I'm pretty involved in this, right? But how do I know in my busy schedule of work and stuff to keep checking the website to see if a notice is posted that I should know about? And that happens in town government too. And I don't know what the solution is there, but I like that email notification list that we were getting because we were getting that for so long. I was getting it twice, as a matter of fact. For some reason, I was really getting it. And I appreciated that, because that would kind of say, hey, here's what's going on. Read it, be informed, be able to answer questions from other people. I haven't heard anyone in my community who's aware that that's went to public comment. And I don't think it's such a radical process for this, I hope. I mean, I don't know who's commenting and what they're saying, of course, but so that's just, I will look at it now that it's up there, but I wasn't even aware, and they were almost done with the period. So
Let me check on the status of the of that email listserv. I confess I'm not personally not sure about that, but I'll check
it
in
was a
with
good
that.
system. It was a good system, and I was sorry to see that go. So that was an aside. Two things. One is I want people to know on the commission, Mike, you may know from talking with Kathy, I'm not sure if you know this or not. On Tuesday, late evening, I received 2 outreaches from 2 residents, one on Belmont Drive and one on Templeton Court. These are residents that are long-term residents. They're very familiar with Saint-Gobain. They're very familiar with the old odors that were there before the RTO. And they both stated at some point that afternoon and into the evening, they were smelling the old smells. And I thought, I know they ceased operations the end of May, and I know the floor workers are laid off. And, so I thought, well, that's weird. What could that be? Maybe is they're trying to do that cleaning, washing, scrubbing of the interior of the facility. They turn on ovens and heat up those stacks to burn off stuff. So my concern is, I think it was the RTO that had that meter or something that kind of said, when they had bypasses and track things like this. So I don't know that there's any way of knowing. My concern is, did residents we can't do anything about it now, get this dose? So Kathy asked me a couple questions, and then she reported it to the compliance division. She said they call Saint-Gobain, who says nothing to see your folks. That's basically what happens. So do we have those air monitors that were the convenience samplings in place anywhere, or those precipitation, collectors that we had on the far end of the site? You may not know that, but you could look into it and let us know. If those are still there, I think it would be really interesting to not neglect tracking that data, because, these are residents that really feel that they were, releases from those stacks. And I'm sure, I don't think it was production related. It couldn't have been, but who the heck knows? Only thing I can come up with is somebody's trying to burn stuff off, or I have no idea, or maybe testing, while they're doing generate. I have no idea, but it was Tuesday, and the smells lingered into the evening. And it really, the sad part about this is there's like a traumatic impact, to residents who especially live in that area. And these 2 residents were really triggered by this, and it took them back to, there's a lot of really sick people in that area, Templeton Court and the condos, to the west of Daniel Webster Highway, right there along the road. There's some 55+ communities, and a lot of people. I know of 4 people on dialysis in one community alone. So there were some upset people. So I'm just putting that out there, maybe just for their validation. I don't think there's much we can do about it, but maybe we have some monitors that we can check, maybe we can't. But I just wanted people to know that had occurred. So any
Sure.
thoughts on that?
I appreciate you asking. Yeah, Kathy had mentioned to me that you'd reached out,
Yeah.
and
So that's
it is my understanding.
I didn't write to everybody. I figured I'd just tell you guys now. That's the story.
Sure.
And
It is my understanding that her staff did look into it and weren't able to identify any clear cause or connection. My understanding is some of the people who called it in were quite some distance from the plant. I think on the order of 2 miles, at least in one case.
The Templeton is not. It's not that far. Maybe Dawn knows where that is. And Belmont Drive is right off of Back River, highly impacted community. Near Fairview, on closer to the exit that you take, to get on and off the highway, just a couple streets up on a hill. And I know what I found in looking at soil sampling and precipitation and various testing that I did a few years ago. Those higher elevation areas where she and her family live had a significant amount there that definitely was air emissions included. So they're not that. And
I'm not suggesting they wouldn't necessarily have been impacted by the emissions. I'm just trying to, again, I don't know much about it other than what Kathy shared with me.
The smells were quite prevalent in these areas back in the day before the RTO. Yeah, so that's, I mean, I don't know, you know, we just, and my other third thing is of course about you had said that there's a revision of a remediation plan under review. That's good to know. I look forward to reading it. I just want you to know that everyone that I talk to, you know, is very concerned about the site. And we talk about the site remediation plan, but when we discuss it and hear details, what we're talking about really is the building. And I have no doubt that, you know, you can oversee, remove your barrels and your, you know, trash and clean it and all that stuff. But, you know, the town had made that request many years ago, you know, about roofing being changed because of the runoff in the, so there's data points, you know, back from 2018 that were really comprehensive data points, outfall, you know, everywhere, groundwater in the site, you know what they are. And even out in the community, certain data points that were very troubling. I would hope potentially in your plan, you would ask for a resampling of all those data points, you know, not if you have like duplicates in the same area, but the ones of most significance in particular, because people are very concerned about the groundwater levels there. And because we're remediating doesn't mean it doesn't matter, because the higher the groundwater is in that area, that's going to cost us money. You know, I think common sense says it's going to increase the GAC and the changes on at least wells 4 and 5 and private wells in the area, because the source is still high. And you know, we look at P's with, you know, why would they do originally the GAC, then the resin, then the pump and treat? That wasn't just to clean up the water, that was also cleaning up the site. So the site can have more work, and people all over town feel very, very strongly about this. So I just wanted to remind you of the thoughts of residents. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, the departure from the facility is really irrelevant to the significant work that's going to be required to, you know, complete investigation and remediation of the site. So that there will be much more monitoring and work needed, and that's separate and apart from the fact that they're leaving the facility this year.
Maureen.
And Representative Mooney.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you for the report as always. Just real quickly, I want to specifically thank you for reviewing the wind down closure timeline for St. Gobain. Just this past week, I was asked by someone local, you know, are they closed? You know, and that word closed has a lot of different definitions to different people. When I think of closed, I think of abandoned building and the sign is down and a for sale sign is up. So I appreciate that summary because that's very important. And again, just this week, I got the inquiry. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Other questions for Mike? Okay, if not, I have a question for you, Mike. In your discussions with St. Gobain, whether it's groundwater management permit or otherwise, has there been discussion about the impact of the lower MCL and requiring a new round of water line extensions potentially?
Yeah, I've certainly asked that, and then the answer basically I've gotten is that, you know, at the times that I've asked it, is that the regulation isn't actually in effect yet. It won't be till the end of this month, and that there hasn't really been, doesn't really seem to be an interest in discussing that. Not that we're not interested in discussing.
Right. So the day of reckoning is June 30th. And part of the reason I say that is I met with our town council subcommittee on PFAS, and I don't know that there's great coordination with the public works departments. You know, Jenkins Road in Bedford is the road that would be impacted by water line extensions. And that is a road that the public works director was planning on repaving this summer. And we have a moratorium of 5 years on cutting newly repaved roads.
Right.
And I don't know beyond Jenkins roads to be able to help the town, you know, where water line extensions would be as a result of the standard versus poets. And I'm sure all of the other towns would have a similar concern where there are potentially water line extensions and conflicting repaving or road reconstruction plans. So I certainly let them know that it would be wise to put off Jenkins Road for the year. But beyond that, I just can't give them any advice because I don't know the answers.
No, and Saint-Gobain should be coordinating with them and communicating with them. So I'll make sure that they get word of that and that there's communication between them so that doesn't happen.
Yes, that would be great. That would be great. All right, unless there are any other questions from Mike, we'll move on to DHHS and Leanne's update.
And I apologize, I do have to scoot to another meeting, so I'm going to take my leave. But thank you all, and everyone have a good weekend.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I've got a couple of updates to share. The first is on the Merrimack cancer investigation. So Dartmouth and HHS have assembled and met with the project's 3 partner member boards. So that's the steering committee, the scientific advisory board, and the community advisory board. We're using the boards to provide input on the project direction and suggestions for next steps. If there's any additional suggestions on board and committee members, you can provide those to me. The Dartmouth team and HHS continue to meet weekly to work on the project's study design, community engagement studios, an analysis plan, and ways to engage the community and participants. We finalized an online interest form and questionnaire to solicit feedback on community concerns and also to help identify community members who might be interested in participating in community engagement studios. And the form's posted on our website, and I will include a link to that in my update that I send out. So the community engagement studios are meetings designed to get community feedback on the research study and offer researchers the opportunity to consult with the population being studied with the goal of improving the research's quality and relevance. So these are small, moderated group discussions where participants are given updates on the study background, progress, and plans, and then they're asked for their perspective on the study, issues in the community, and input on the way the study can be improved. Studios have been rescheduled. They're slated to happen in June and July. And due to the short project time frame, we really want to get these completed soon because we are going to be using these studios to help shape the direction of the rest of the study. We have been not had the engagement on the feedback study and the number of people signing up for these engagement studios has been slower than anticipated. So we're really looking for help to get the word out to more people. We had created a social media ad that I had shared with the commission after the last meeting. We got some feedback from a couple of folks that it was potentially not as clear as it could be. So we reworded a couple of elements of that, and I'll share a new version of that with the commission after the meeting. So in that light, we're looking at additional ways to publicize the community engagement studios. We actually just this week started a paid social media ad. So that same ad that I'll share with you, rather than just sharing it through our social media channels, we're paying so that it'll show up in people's social media feed in the target areas that we're interested in. We're also reaching out to town health officers and local libraries for support as well. So I'll share that, and if you're able to share it, I know many of you have already shared, but if there's other folks that you can share it with, or if you have any other suggestions on how we can spread the word, it'd be much appreciated, and let me know if you have any suggestions. So that's the update on the cancer investigation. The other update I have is on the clinician's guidance, and we're still working on updating that with the new ATSDR recommendations. And that's all I have.
Go ahead, Lorraine.
Amy, maybe it's the same thing I said to Mike, but a different version of it. Maybe Leanne and Amy is listening. Maybe where is that email list that that used to go out to everybody? Because if that was linked to the old website, maybe it's stored somewhere. I don't know, some techie person can maybe take a look, see. If you could find that and utilize that and send out this information, I think you could reach a lot of people, because sharing on social media I've been doing, and I did see your paid ad, it looked good, and
Oh,
reshared.
good.
So I did come up on my feed. And I think I'll try to engage the town and, say what can we do, and do they have any thoughts? And because putting it on websites again, even if you're informed, you don't know to check it. So I wish we could find that email list and how it came to be, because it was extensive. It was a lot of people received those, and those are all impacted areas. So.
Okay. Thanks for the
Lorraine,
suggestion.
this is Amy. That list was linked to the old website, and I don't know if it exists somewhere. I mean, we still have the old website archived. I can look into it for you. The unfortunate thing is the new website, we don't have that capability to kind of recreate that list. I'll look into it and I can let you know what I find out.
Well, maybe you can do that whole BCC copy zap out little trick that I have on a scrap piece of paper, because I never remember how to do it.
Don?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Leanne, I was just wondering, when you're talking about public outreach, has anybody considered reaching out to WMUR and seeing if they would be interested in doing something? I don't know, obviously there's a cost for that, but maybe perhaps would they do something pro bono, just for a quick notification or something like that? And I don't know if you're concerned that the audience is too broad, because it covers pretty much the whole state, but I think that would have a significant reach, because I know a lot of people, there's a lot of things when things go public on social media and stuff, that you may hear somebody comment about something, but when it runs on WMUR, it really seems to hit a big audience, and you get a lot of feedback from something like that. So I would think that an issue like this would be something they wouldn't look to profit off of, hopefully, and maybe do something as a community service. I mean, they do their own editorials and things like that, which they're not making money off of, and that's airtime that they're spending. So I'm just thinking maybe something like this would be, a good opportunity to reach out and see if they could do something either low cost or pro bono, ideally. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
And don't forget to check Fox News. We have a lot of Fox News viewers in Merrimack. Maybe contact, the local journalist, Union Leader and Telegraph, and even NHPR. They would be probably willing to do an article that goes out, to their viewers. And they also use social media to link those articles. And that may be just another way for people to read it, see it, hear it, and maybe we can do it that way.
Other
Great,
questions?
thank you for the suggestions.
If not, we'll move on to Maureen Mooney for an update on an eventful month since the last meeting on legislation.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, members of the commission. So for our legislative update today, I've narrowed it down. Here are two charts, the 2023 tracking chart and 2024. We're following at this point 7 bills. 7 bills have made it this far. Of those 7, 1 has already been signed by the governor, and that's House Bill 1171. And that is the Commission on Environmentally Triggered Ailments. 1 of the 7 has been a non-concur. So it made it this far, but it won't go any further. And that is Senate Bill 413. And then the remaining 5 of those 7 will eventually get to the governor's desk. And I see today, actually, while on this call, a press release was issued from the governor's office that he signed 51 bills today. Obviously, there's a list that has to be gone through, but these are the bills that we're following, that we're hoping for a signature on. I'll list the 5. All House bills. 398, 1114, 1415, 1649, and 1613. And all that I said has been updated in the charts that we're tracking these pieces of legislation on. Okay, that being said, the House filing period for legislation for next year for incumbents running again in the House, it's September 3rd through the 13th. Then, of course, on the House side, there's another filing window, and that comes after the general election, and that is November 6th through the 22nd. It is unclear what the Senate filing dates are for next year. As we know, they have different rules in the House side. I did talk to the Senate clerk's office today, and it's a little unclear, but I'm sure they will have similar filing periods, likely at the end of September, and then again at some point after the general election. And with that, I'll conclude my legislative report. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. And actually, I know we don't have many, Senator Ricciardi or many representatives, but I know it's been a tremendous amount of work, as well as DHHS and DES this year put in, and probably last year too. So our appreciation to all of you. I think that probably concludes what we have to discuss. Our next meeting is going to be July 12th at 2 p.m. Planning on taking August off, as is our tradition. If there are bullet points or an outline that somebody wants in our annual report, July would be a very good time to get it to me, because September doesn't leave us a lot of time between then and November 1st when the report has to be submitted. I'm not sure, however, to find public comment, but I don't see any. And so with that, it's not an official meeting, so I'll just ask if anybody here has anything else to say. And if not, we will be adjourned. Have a great weekend. See you after the 4th. Bye now.
Bye. Thank you.